Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something brand new.
Yeah, a new game just hit Steam called RoadCraft.
Exactly. And it's all about, well, big machines, construction sim stuff.
Heavy machinery, yeah.
And this deep dive, it's actually a special request for Jeff from Indianapolis. We hear you've got a thing for bulldozers, Jeff.
Well, Jeff, you might be in luck with this one.
Definitely. And speaking of bringing this together, a big shout out to Misha St Ores, our Adobe creator and the producer behind this deep dive.
Great job, Misha.
So this is Season 4, Episode 11, and as you know, this season is all about looking at games through the lens of reviews, seeing what people think.
Right, so RoadCraft, it's from Saber Interactive, the people behind MudRunner, SnowRunner.
Those kind of gritty off-road sims.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. Let's get into what RoadCraft is actually about.
Okay, so RoadCraft, it actually pivots a bit from those earlier games. It's less about pure off-road survival and more focused on large-scale construction.
Construction and what else?
And disaster recovery. So the premise is you're managing a company, you've got a whole fleet over 40 vehicles.
Including, yes, Jeff, bulldozers.
Absolutely. Bulldozers, cranes, dump trucks, asphalt pavers.
Yeah.
The works.
Okay, so what's the objective? What are you doing with all this kit across the 8 maps?
The core goal is rebuilding. The world's been hit by natural disasters, and you need to basically fix it. Clear debris, repair roads, bridges.
Infrastructure, basically.
Exactly. Restore power, get local industries running again, that kind of thing.
Okay, so when you're playing, what's that moment-to-moment feel like? What are you actually, doing in the game?
Well, the gameplay really centers on clearing away all that destruction.
Yeah.
Rubble, damaged buildings, you name it. Then you move on to the rebuilding phase.
Roads, power lines.
Right. Getting things working again. And a really key thing they've carried over from, like, SnowRunner is their physics engine.
The terrain deformation stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're driving, say, a big bulldozer, you feel the weight. You see the ground actually change as you push dirt around. It feels impactful, believable.
Makes sense. So the satisfaction comes from seeing that change.
I think so. That's what the early buzz suggests. Taking a devastated area and bit by bit making it functional again, transforming the landscape.
That sounds pretty rewarding, actually. More tangible than just reaching a checkpoint, maybe.
Definitely. There's a visual progress you're making.
Now, you mentioned MudRunner and SnowRunner. Those games often felt quite solitary, that struggle against the environment. Does RoadCraft handle multiplayer differently?
Oh, yeah. That's a big change here. RoadCraft has co-op multiplayer. Up to 4 players can team up.
4 players. Okay, how does that work in practice?
Well, it opens up a lot of strategic options, right? You could have one person clearing a path with a dozer.
While another uses a crane nearby.
Exactly. And maybe someone else is running a dump truck, hauling materials, or even paving a new road section. It's about coordinating those big tasks together.
Sharing the workload and the achievement, I guess.
Right. Tackling these massive rebuilding projects as a team, it adds a whole different layer to it.
Okay, this is where we get into the Season 4 theme. The reviews. What's the initial reaction? What are critics and early players saying?
So far, it's been mostly positive. We're seeing review scores generally in the, say, 7.5 to 9 out of 10 range.
That's pretty strong out of the gate. What are they liking specifically?
The praise seems to focus on the construction mechanics being genuinely engaging, people like operating the machines. Also, the sheer scale of the projects you can tackle.
And that feeling of progress again.
Yeah, that sense of bringing order back from chaos. A lot of viewers are seeing it as a smart evolution of the runner formula.
Applying that physics engine to a new kind of challenge.
Exactly. Hardcore Gamer called it a giant sandbox filled with all the coolest trucks, which kind of sums it up nicely.
Coolest trucks. I like that.
Yeah.
But no game is perfect, right? What are some of the criticisms or discussion points popping up?
Well, a few things. One that's mentioned is the learning curve. It might be a bit steep for some players.
How so?
Particularly with the controls for some of the more complex machines. Cranes are often mentioned. It's not just driving. You really have to learn how to operate them effectively.
Okay, so maybe requires a bit more patience up front?
Potentially, yeah. But the good news is Saber, the developers, have reportedly acknowledged this feedback. They seem to be listening, which is always positive.
Good to hear.
Trade in your boring job for a brilliant career using Adobe Creative Cloud. Start learning now with the free trial link in the description.
What else are people talking about? Any other potential downsides?
Another point is potential repetitiveness over the long haul,
The core loop.
Right. While clearing, repairing, building is engaging initially, doing variations of that for dozens of hours might start to feel a bit samey for some players. We'll see how that pans out.
Makes sense for a sim game, potentially. Anything on the technical side? Graphics? Sound?
Some minor points there.
Mm-hmm.
A bit of feedback suggesting the vehicle audio could be beefed up, made more immersive. And also some comments about the AI pathfinding for automated convoys needing maybe a little refinement.
Convoys. So you manage AI trucks, too.
Yeah, part of the logistics seems to involve setting up resource deliveries.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned earlier this is a bit of a shift from MudRunner and SnowRunner. How are the hardcore fans of those games reacting?
That's a really key discussion point, actually. It touches on how simulation games evolve. RoadCraft seems to have streamlined some of the really hardcore sim elements.
Like what, specifically?
Things like super detailed fuel management or really granular vehicle damage and repair systems that were big in SnowRunner. RoadCraft seems more focused on the construction task itself.
Less on the survival aspect of just keeping the truck running.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And this has caused a bit of a split. Some fans appreciate the clearer focus, maybe find it more accessible.
But others miss that deep simulation.
Exactly. They miss those extra layers of challenge, that resource juggling, that constant threat of breaking down miles from anywhere. It made those games feel very intense.
So RoadCraft might be easier to get into, maybe?
Potentially, yes. More welcoming to a broader audience, perhaps, but maybe less satisfying for those players who really loved the deep, almost punishing realism of the earlier titles. It's a different flavor of simulation.
Okay, so pulling that all together, who is RoadCraft really for? Who's the ideal player here?
Well, thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
it seems tailor-made for fans of construction sims, obviously.
Yeah.
People who just love heavy machinery, operating it, seeing it work.
Makes sense.
Also, definitely players who enjoy co-op. Tackling big projects with friends seems like a major draw.
So the social aspect is key.
I think so. And if you like the physics in SnowRunner or MudRunner, how the vehicles interact with the world, you'll probably find that same satisfaction here, just applied differently.
And generally,
Gamers looking for a rewarding, task-driven experience where you see clear progress, you feel like you're achieving something tangible by fixing up these environments.
but maybe not for...
Maybe not ideal if you're specifically looking for that hardcore, edge-of-your-seat off-road survival challenge that defined the previous runner games. It's just a different beast.
Yeah.
Still challenging, but in a different way.
Gotcha. Okay, let's talk practicalities. It launched today, May 20th, 2025, on Steam. What are the options if you want to pick it up?
Right. There's a standard edition for $39.99,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a rebuild edition for $49.99.
What's the extra $10 get you in the rebuild edition?
That includes the base game, plus something called the Rebuild expansion, which promises new maps, contracts, vehicles later on, and you also get a unique scout vehicle right away at launch.
Okay. And are there bundles, like with SnowRunner?
Yep. Looks like there are bundles available, too, if you want to grab both.
How's it doing on Steam so far? User reviews.
It's early days, of course, but right now it's sitting at mixed user reviews. About 50% positive from the first wave of players, around 150 reviews or so last I checked.
Mixed. So that reflects some of the points we discussed. Maybe the learning curve, the shift from SnowRunner.
Very likely, yeah. It suggests the game is resonating with some, but maybe not hitting the mark perfectly for everyone, especially those runner veterans. It also supports single-player and that online co-op.
Trade in your boring job for a brilliant career using Adobe Creative Cloud. Start learning now with the free trial link in the description.
And the usual Steam features. Achievements, cloud saves.
All there. 44 achievements, trading cards, Steam Cloud support, standard stuff.
What about running it? What kind of PC do you need?
Requires a 64-bit processor and OS, which is pretty standard now. They do recommend an SSD for optimal performance.
SSDs make a big difference in loading these big open maps usually.
For sure. Specific hardware requirements aren't super demanding on the minimum side, but like any modern game, you'll need a decent rig to run it well on higher settings.
Right. And what are the key features Sabre themselves are really pushing on the Steam page? What's their main pitch?
They're highlighting leading that disaster recovery company, obviously, using all the different construction machines to restart industries.
Clearing debris, rebuilding.
Yep, rebuilding infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
managing resource convoys, that logistics element we mentioned. The realistic physics engine is a big one for them.
Over 40 vehicles.
Right, unlockable and customizable. The 8 unique maps, they mentioned those are 4 kilometers each. There's also a recycling and resource management system in there.
And the co-op, of course.
And definitely the up to 4-player co-op. That's a major selling point.
We heard the hardcore gamer quote earlier. Any other quick takes from critics that capture the vibe?
Yeah, a couple more. PC Gamer called it a physics puzzler wrapped in a lavish simulator outfit.
Ooh, physics puzzler?
Yeah.
I like that. It suggests there's some thought involved beyond just driving.
Exactly. And Auto Evolution just flat out said, I'm eager to keep playing, which, is always a good sign. It suggests that Core Loop, despite potential repetition worries, is compelling enough to keep people hooked, at least initially.
So summing it all up, RoadCraft, just launched, sounds like a really solid, potentially very satisfying experience, especially if you're into big machines, construction, and maybe playing with friends.
Yeah, that seems to be the sweet spot. Operating heavy machinery, large-scale projects, co-op fun.
The shift away from the hardcore survival of SnowRunner is definitely a talking point, something for longtime fans to consider. But that core idea of fixing things, building things up, that seems to be landing well.
Absolutely. It hits that satisfaction button for a lot of players.
And Jeff, back to you in Indianapolis with that love for bulldozers and presumably the satisfaction of a job well done.
Yeah. This one really might be the digital construction site you've been waiting for, Jeff. Give it a look.
Which actually brings up a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about RoadCraft and that feeling of accomplishment. What other kinds of simulation games really nail that sense of mastery? Mastering complex systems, seeing tangible results from your efforts.
That's a good question. Flight sims,
Sure.
factory builders, farming sims even.
Yeah, lots to think about there. What gives you that feeling of satisfaction in a game? Something to mull over. Anyway, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into RoadCraft.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. I'm Misha, and let me send out a huge thank you for listening. If you want more content on gaming, education, or other fun stuff, head over and find me on YouTube. Link is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next deep dive.